welcome to the Lit Up Lightworker podcast. This is the live recording of the Lit Up Lightworker podcast, bringing you fun and soulful interviews with spiritual teachers with the aim of tuning you in and lighting you up. My name is George Lizos. I'm a spiritual teacher, intuitive, and the author of Be the Guru, and I help lightworkers to find, follow, and fulfill their life purpose. And I'm so excited to have here with me Jess Carlson. Jess Carlson is a chaos witch, intuitive tarot and oracle reader, writer, and magical teacher focused on spreading the power and simplicity of magic. Jess is known for keeping her teachings and guidance practical and approachable so everyone can gain something from her magic and reconnect with their inner witch. She was voted Witch Way magazine's favorite witchcraft blog and witch teacher for 2018, thanks to the wonderful community that has connected to her work. Jess, welcome to the Lit Up Lightworker podcast.
Hello, thank you.
So I want to start from the beginning. Before we go into chaos magic, before we go into magic in general, what has been your path to becoming a witch, to finding out about witchcraft? What has been your hero's journey, in other words?
Well, I grew up in Connecticut, so I grew up in New England, so I was kind of growing up around the history of witchcraft in a sense because of the witch trials in Salem, and actually the first witch execution in New England happened in Connecticut. It wasn't in Salem, it actually happened way earlier. So I grew up with this kind of undertone of that, going on all these field trips to Salem and stuff as a kid, and so I was always kind of aware that it was a thing. And then when I was about 8 years old, I was as a child, very like avid reader and just kind of blew through everything. And I quickly learned as a child that fiction bored me. I didn't really care about stories. I wanted to learn things, very much into like wanting to learn. So I quickly found that I could kind of like veer off in the library to the nonfiction section and find really interesting stuff. And that was where I first found witchcraft as a modern practice. It's where I discovered tarot when I was 8. And that was the first thing that kind of got me on that path. I got my first deck from my grandmother as a please stop playing with my poker cards gift when I was 10. And then it just kind of took off from there. And so I started practicing witchcraft as like, in a self-dedicated ritual form when I was 13. So it just kind of was something that my parents aren't religious, but because I do come from a mostly Italian and Catholic family, I was kind of forced into the whole go to your CCD classes, make your confirmation, all that stuff, because my great grandmother was still alive, and had I not done that, it would have been an unending problem for my mother. So but my parents aren't religious. My dad didn't really care. My mom actually was kind of like all about it. Like she was like, oh, that's really interesting. And so if I would read a book on witchcraft or Wicca, she'd read it too. And so she was very supportive. My dad was like, as long as no one's getting killed, that's cool. And, but I went through the whole church thing because of my great grandmother still being around. And so when I made my confirmation at 16, I'd already been practicing solitary Wicca for 3 years. So that was fun. But that was just kind of the path that led me there. It was going to the library and not wanting to read any more Sweet Valley High books and like looking for something else to do. So
that's so interesting. That is so interesting because many light workers and spiritual seekers that I talk with, they had a similar journey in the sense that they were brought up under their parents' belief systems and then eventually had this unexplainable calling that led them on to developing their own path. And it was so great that you had a supporting family that allowed you to do what you wanted to do, basically, and supported that decision of yours. So,
well, what's interesting, here's what's really interesting. I just want to throw this out there for anyone who's like, oh, I want to do this, but I have to go to church or whatever. If you're Catholic or being raised Catholic, one thing that I learned very quickly when I really got into learning witchcraft is that if you have to be a secret witch in any religion, Catholicism is for you, because that's like the most witchy religion out there. It's just so full, everything that's happening. Now, when I look back on it as an adult who's been doing this for 30 years, it's like, holy crap, it's just like witchcraft approved by the church. Like that's really, there's so much magic in Catholicism. So I always tell my husband, if we ever have to live anywhere where I have to hide my practices and beliefs, I'll just say I'm Catholic, because that's easy enough. So
I find that so interesting because I grew up in Cyprus, which is a primarily Orthodox Christian society. And I was brought up Orthodox Christian, and I was deep into the religion myself up until I started reading Harry Potter, which I loved. And that's what got me actually into spirituality. And then the Orthodox Christian Church created like a whole propaganda against Harry Potter, just saying that Harry Potter is luring children into the devil and Satanism and then witchcraft. And I'm like, and now, like in retrospect, like comparing what I've learned about spirituality and magic, and then seeing how like Christian church performs their rituals, I'm like, it's not so different from the pagan rituals that I do. They have an altar and they set up different like saints, and they I don't know, praise them or something. So I don't really get the difference. So, but it's interesting that we're seeing things like the world is seeing the same thing from two different perspectives, seemingly contrasting perspectives. But when you really look at the basis of it, there is so much commonalities.
yeah.
Now, you mentioned you started with Wicca, and now you're a chaos magic. So let's get into witchcraft in general. First of all, could you tell us the difference between magic with a CK and magic with a C?
The difference is that magic with a CK is just a spelling differentiation to kind of separate it from stage magic or illusionary magic. So Aleister Crowley gets attributed with that differentiation in his writings, and it just kind of carried on. And that's just now, and today you see some people don't like that. They feel it's a little archaic, and so they don't use it. I use it. It's hard for me not to. I actually find I have to force myself to not use the K. But, you know, I've always kind of, you know, quote, grown up, you know, as a witch, thinking like, oh, you know, if it's got a K, it's for me, you know. So I just always kind of, I use the K, but that's the difference.
Yeah, but in essence, yeah, it is the difference between stage magic and then practicing witchcraft. What is witchcraft for those of you who don't know?
Well, this gets a little tricky, and so I have to kind of preface all of this with, this is my answer to these questions, because you can ask 10 witches this question, you're going to get 20 different answers. So for me, the way that I look at magic and working with witchcraft is I kind of go along with Aleister Crowley's idea of it being the science and the art of creating change in accordance with will. But when Crowley talks about will, and he says, he uses it capitalized as big, there's big W and little w. Big W, which is what he means when he's talking about magic, that's your quote, true will. That's what he defined as being your, you know, your purpose or your destiny, like, you know, the thing that you're here for. And so the way that I see magic along with that is that working any magic that is going to help lead you to your true will, that is going to fulfill the steps that you need to do what you're here to do, to keep you in alignment with the universe and nature and all that. That's the magic you want to do. And so magic that kind of doesn't do that, and that either diverts you away from those things or, you know, could take away from it, is magic that you should kind of question whether or not you should do it. And with magic, there's always a way, like you can have an idea of wanting to do something and realize maybe this isn't the right approach, and you can always twist things around. There's like 10 ways to do one thing. So, you know, but it is all about actually creating the change. But here's what's important. And this is where we differentiate a little bit of that stage magic or movie magic from real magic. It's not about creating supernatural change outside of yourself. It's not about manifesting in front of you that car you want or something, or, you know, Leviosa, and all of a sudden, you know, like things are flying around you. That's not what it's about. What it's about is it's changing you and changing your energy and your perception and your mindset in order to bring you into alignment with those things, because what you see and what you believe is going to create that world around you. So when you do magic and it changes you, changes your vibration and changes what is attracted or repelled from you. And then that's how you come into alignment with the thing that you're after. So, so all magic is about change, but it's about changing you, not trying to really change things outside of yourself, because that is kind of like futile work most of the time.
So what I'm hearing is that basically magic is a very focused, practical way of using the law of attraction to create a reality. Isn't that what it is?
In a lot of ways, because law of attraction is actually, it's so funny because, of course, most people today know it thanks to Oprah and The Secret, but law of attraction is a very ancient principle. It's one of the universal laws. And, it is this idea that, like is going to attract like. And if you are focused on what it is that you want and you're making everything around you also be focused on that thing, there's really no way you cannot eventually meet up with it because you're putting yourself in that path. The use of like witchcraft, doing a spell, specifically like doing a candle spell or burning things, whatever. The idea is that the energies of those tools and those ingredients, they should also be aligned with that. So you're kind of bringing that energy into it too. So when you have that energy, your focus, and then it's all kind of going out into like this beam into the universe towards what you want. That's how you end up getting there. So
okay, I have a follow-up question on this one. So there are different schools of magic. Some people choose to practice in a specific school like you do. Other people just do their own thing. For example, I started from Wicca as well, and I experimented with magic. But now what I do is like a combination of different modalities where I use different like statues and symbolism and candles, and I make up my own what I call manifestation rituals, where I bring elements together. I set my intention, I light up the candles, I do some mudras and maybe some mantras, and I write down some stuff. And that works for me. Could that also be considered magic? Or does it have to be within the constraints of a school?
No, that's still magic. I mean, a lot of people are working magic without calling it that,
Yes.
and that's fine. You call it what you're comfortable with. But like what you're talking about is probably one of the most common ways that people, I find end up, like that's where they end up. They might start with a very defined tradition or in a very, very specific, with a very specific path with this is how you do this and this is how you do that. And eventually it kind of becomes too constrictive or your beliefs change. And so you kind of walk away from that and then you go to something else. And I find that a lot of people that are more like working with magic and spirituality in a very sort of free form way have already been through like 5 or 6 other things. And now they're just like, this really isn't working. Let's try the next thing and the next thing. And then eventually realize, you know what, I can just make my own tradition because you totally can. So, it's still magic. I feel like if you're doing stuff with intention and you're bringing together resources and you're focusing it and you're putting it out there, to me, that's magic. So meditation is magic. Affirmations are magic. I love using mantras. I do a lot of mantra work. So mantra's magic to me. So it's all magic.
That is so freeing. Thank you so much for this distinction. Okay, now let's talk about chaos magic. Now, I first heard about chaos magic in my previous work. One of my colleagues, I asked him what his spirituality was all about, and he's like, well, I practice chaos magic. I'm like, what is that? I had zero idea. He explained to me. I still didn't understand. I Googled it like before our interview. I still can't understand. So please break it down for me.
Here's the thing. Not understanding it is exactly the point. So chaos magic is a fairly, when it comes to like magical traditions, it's a newer tradition. It started in the 70s, grew really big in the 80s. It is a tradition that started off really intending to be a bit of a farce. It wasn't meant to be serious, really. The first little group of people that were doing it were kind of doing it to almost sort of like troll another group of very overly serious magicians. And it just turned out that what they were doing that they thought was just kind of goofy actually worked for them because they believed in what they were doing and they were able to focus that, intention. And so they were able to make things that to most other occult practitioners just looked like, a bunch of uneducated buffoons, like, goofing around, when in reality, they were working some serious magic. So chaos magic today, as we kind of look at it, it's a tradition without a tradition. One of the biggest aspects of chaos magic is to avoid all dogma. So there is no, set system. Every chaos practitioner does things a little differently. and then we also kind of have this like discussion a lot about the fact that you can even say that. Doesn't that then make chaos magic a little bit like now it's getting into a tradition? Like it's kind of funny. Like some of us, if we get together, if you end up, you know, talking to another chaos witch, oh, you do chaos magic too? Great. Okay, well, now that we're both talking about the same thing, we're already screwing up our own practice. So like, but the idea of it is that you're working with really more the power of belief. And this is the thing that really got me drawn to chaos magic. Chaos magic does not have any set tradition, so there's no set practices or gods or anything like that. The idea is that you're working with belief as your main tool. What you believe in, whether it's a specific magical practice that comes from another tradition, whether it's a specific god, goddess, spirit, whatever, if you really believe in that thing and you believe that that is what is going to work for you to achieve your goal at that time, then you work with it. But tomorrow it may be totally different and you may have something else that you feel is going to work better. So you might work with that for something else. So, you know, like for me, I do a lot, like I said, I do a lot of work with mantras, but I don't do a lot of other stuff that might fall into like Hinduism or, you know, with Buddhism, I see Buddhism more as a philosophy, and I do consider myself philosophically very Buddhist. But I don't do a lot of other stuff that might follow around the work of mantras. So I might do japa meditation and do mala work one day or for 40 days if I'm doing it right, and then not do it again for a long time and instead do more, you know, regular meditation work or something. So it's whatever is going to work for you at the time. But the big thing is being willing to let something go if it's not going to work for you. So like in other traditions, it's like, oh, well, this doesn't feel like it's going to work, but that's what we do as whatever tradition we are. So I have to find a way to work it. And if you don't believe in what you're doing, especially in any kind of magic, if you don't really believe 100% in what you're doing, you might as well not be doing it, you know? Yeah. So that's one of the things about chaos magic that really drew me, was the idea of it's not like, oh, I'm just going to grab this thing from this tradition that I know nothing about and use it. You have to still know about that tradition, know about those practices, know about those gods and their myths and their energies and what have you before you can go working with them. But once you do, you work with it, but now you don't have to be married to it. You can let it go and work with something else. So
I love it. Thank you so much for explaining it. It's actually so much easier than what I read online or what other people told me about. So it's basically an eclectic way of using magic.
It's funny because that when I first started getting really into chaos magic, that was the thing I was confused about. Like, what's the difference between this and just being an eclectic? And there is a distinction. The distinction between the two is that in eclectic practice, you still have things that you do as a like tradition. Like it's kind of like you have your own tradition. Like you always do, you know, this certain thing at Samhain, or you always do this certain thing for this particular, you know, need. But if like, say one Samhain, you have something totally different you want to do, in chaos magic, you might choose to do that. Whereas in an eclectic, you know, your own eclectic practice, you might say, you know, but I've always done it this way. I'm just going to keep doing it this way because it's worked in the past. It'll work again. Something may have worked in the past, but if it doesn't feel right, if it doesn't seem like, this is the thing for right now, with chaos magic, you let it go and you go find something else. So eclectic magic is funny because in a lot of ways it is a tradition, but it's your tradition that you've set up with your beliefs, and that's cool, but it's not quite the same. There is a distinction. It's a little weird one, but.
In other words, chaos is liminal and ever-changing for the practitioner. Yes. It's as if the practitioner can't really or doesn't want to settle in a specific belief system and just keeps changing and being liminal in it.
Yes, exactly.
Oh, wow. Okay, it's an important distinction to make between eclecticism, because if I were to consider myself like what kind of witch I am, I would say I'm an eclectic witch because I have a set belief systems. I'm a priest to a pagan religion. So I work within the Greek Hellenic gods and goddesses. So that is my belief system. And even though I bring like angels into my practice, it is still a set system. So I would be an eclectic rather than a chaos witch.
Exactly.
Perfect. Glad to settle that. Okay, let's move on to another question that Actually, before we move on to the next question regarding whether we can practice, whether everyone can practice magic or not, I have a question regarding chaos magic and combining seemingly contrasting religions. Back in the day when I was discovering my spirituality and practicing different kind of stuff and transitioning from Christianity to something more spiritual, I came upon a book called Christian Wicca, which claimed to combine Christianity, the Trinity, with witchcraft. I'm just curious, as a chaos witch, what is your view on combining the two? Are the two contrasting to be combined, or is it possible?
It's, here's my thought on that. So first of all, again, if we're taking it from a chaos magic perspective, the idea is the belief. Do you believe that that is okay? Do you believe that these two things can work together? I feel like witchcraft as opposed to Wicca, because there's also that confusion. Some people equate them as being the same thing. They're not. Yes. Wicca is a religion. Witchcraft is a practice. There are a lot of religions and spiritual practices that involve witchcraft or allow witchcraft to come in. Whereas, Wicca it's a religion. It's a set religion. So for someone who's Christian, there are a lot of Christian witches, Jewish witches. There's just, a lot. But I feel like that becomes a personal choice, because you can certainly argue that Christianity and witchcraft don't mix, because if you're a Bible believing Christian, then you've got the Bible telling you witchcraft is wrong. Yet at the same time, it's also in there saying, hey, we're going to go now call up some spirits and ask for their advice. So the Bible itself, those people were a little confused. But I think it's a matter of choice. It's a matter of personal preference. And I think if you feel it works for you, great. If not, then don't do it. But,
got it.
They're different.
Makes sense. Yeah, of course. They are. Yeah, but it makes sense if the person just finds commonalities. Okay, so is everybody a witch? Can everybody be a witch? Can everybody practice witchcraft, or are we born into it?
Anyone can become a witch, but it's not easy. Anyone can practice magic, but it's not easy. In order to really practice magic and be effective with it, you have to be willing to change. You have to be willing to take responsibility for your past, present, and future. You have to be willing to sacrifice things to get what you want. It's not something that does the work for you. It helps you to do what you need to do in your own life. Because again, it's not like the movies. It's not like you're just going to cast a spell and everything's just going to happen for you. You still have to go out and do the real world work. You still have to go actually walk that path. So anyone can do it. Again, belief is the key. If you believe that you can do this, and if you believe in the practices and everything, then you're already like a step ahead of someone else. So that's good. But it does take time, and it takes practice, and it takes study. And, because in order to believe something, you have to understand it, So in order to really believe in your magic, you have to take time to learn about magic and learn about all those practices, which to me is a big thing, where you have to get away from just books that have the word witch or witchcraft in the title. You have to go and read about philosophy and science and comparative religion and myths from other, traditions that you might not necessarily be drawn to, and just kind of, have a general, kind of openness to learning anything and everything. And consistency, like being willing to set aside, when I talk about sacrifice, I'm not talking about sacrifice a baby. I'm talking about sacrifice your time, your money, your energy, because, you might have a ritual or something that you want to work with that is going to take 2, 3, 4 days to work. And that means that maybe every day when you get home from, work, you're spending your evenings doing this magical work. And you may need to sacrifice spending time with friends or family, or doing, other things that you would normally be doing in order to do that. And also when a sacrifice of resources. So when we do things like use, something I use a lot in magic is honey. but I don't go and buy like the 99-cent store honey. I go and buy the best stuff that I can get, that I can afford at the time, because that using, you know, better quality and sacrificing that money and that resource is like, it's a sacrifice. It's giving up something of yours to get something in return. So by using something that's going to be a little bit more, you know, inconvenient, let's say, and a little less like, you know, oh, I could just go and buy like, you know, a gallon of honey at the dollar store and we'll be good. When, you know, instead you might only be able to get like a little thing for, you know, $10 or something at Whole Foods, but you know that the quality is better, the energy is better.
Yeah.
So that's kind of a sacrifice.
Jess, how can one go about to start practicing chaos magic if there are no books on chaos magic, because it's so
there
diverse
are a
and
lot
personal?
of well, there are a lot of books on chaos magic, which is
Okay.
what's funny, and why then we're like, well, how is this still chaos then? But a lot of the books that are on chaos magic that you're going to find are like you said, like, oh, I went and like looked this up on like Wikipedia and I'm still confused. These books are very confusing, but they're kind of meant to be, but they're also really they get you thinking, and they can be very funny. A lot of chaos magic authors are very, very sardonic, and they're very funny and witty, and you have to be a little bit like, it's sort of like playing a little like 4D chess and Magic. It's just like a little like, everything's very meta, and you have to be like not taking everything so seriously. But with chaos magic specifically, I think that the best way for somebody to go about learning it is to first learn about what's called the 6 principles, which are the like kind of like the, again, it's like now we're putting structure in chaos magic, which is the like the 6 things that you are kind of need to have or need to be able to do in order to practice. So the first one, again, is avoidance of dogma, and then you have personal experience, because it's everything in chaos magic is about your experience. What someone else tells you or what they've been through does not matter. It's your experience that does. And then you have technical excellence. So like I said, having to, just because you want to work with you know, like just because you want to work with Odin doesn't mean you should work with Odin. You need to learn about Odin, and then if you click and he work, you know, it makes sense for you and you get it and you feel a connection, then do it. If not, who else can you work with? So there's that, like always making sure you're learning about what you're gonna work with and not just grabbing it and going. Deconditioning, which again is that like letting go, being willing to say, okay, this is not going to work for me now just because it worked before. I need to let this go, and just kind of allowing yourself to separate from your past a bit, even if it was successful, you know. Diversity and approach. So again, that idea of always being open to whatever sounds and looks and feels like it's going to work, even if it doesn't align with what you've done in the past. And then Gnosis. And Gnosis in chaos magic is specifically referring to going into altered states. So working in either inhibitory or excitatory gnosis with your magic. So being able to go into like a death pose and really go into that like completely shut down state. Because in chaos magic, when you work with gnosis, the focus is then, so when you're in your gnosis, you're solely focused on that thing that you're working towards. Nothing else exists in your mind or around you, and that is how you then what is kind of called like lighting the fire for your magic. That is what actually puts it out there. So one of the things that a lot of people either will find if they go looking like, how do I start doing chaos magic, or, you know, what's my first chaos magic thing I should do, the big thing everyone's going to find is sigil magic, because that's probably the most well-known form of chaos magic that is used in many traditions. And when you sit down and really look at chaos magic's approach to sigil magic, all of these principles are involved in some way in working with a sigil. And it does require you to be willing to let go of so much in order to create a sigil, you know, fire off a sigil, and then, you know, have it actually work for you. Because a huge part of things is like the deconditioning, like forgetting what you just did, like forgetting what that sigil that you created even was for, and like just allowing it to go out into the world and do magic for you. But you have that alignment through the Gnosis work. So there are books out there to read. One book that I always kind of recommend, because it's short and it's quick and it's a good one, is Oven Ready Chaos by Phil Hine. That's a really good quick primer. I think it's less than 100 pages. And it's very entertaining, but also very full of like the basics that you need. So that's kind of where I would say to start.
Thank you so much for giving us the 6 pillars. That's so important for me. I mean, it satisfies my masculine energy, like wanting to put everything into a box, compartmentalization and all that. But I got everything. Gnosis, though, although it's a Greek word, I know there's a lot of philosophy behind it. Could you give us a few examples of what that would entail?
So if, for instance, when you're working with a sigil and you have now drawn your sigil and now it's time to sort of charge up that sigil and put it out there. There are a lot of different ways that in sigil magic we do that. One of them is, the one that I prefer is a very, very deep meditative state where you are visually focused on whatever, on your sigil. So it becomes, you are kind of in an inhibitory state. That's kind of where you're kind of shutting everything else down. You put your, physically kind of bring yourself into a very still state where really the only thing that's even remotely active is your mind. And you're focusing on visually in like connecting to that sigil where almost you and the sigil become one. And when the sigil starts to visually sort of change for you, for some people it starts to look like it's glowing, for some people it looks like it's vibrating. That's then when you would kind of like in your mind like push everything out, sort of like you're just like tossing a giant balloon up into the universe, and it's just taking that energy with you, and then you kind of ground yourself and bring yourself back.
Wow. So it's like deep energy work basically, and manipulating energy and putting it with your intention into the sigil.
Yeah, because like when we, when you talk about like gnosis from the definition of the Greek word and its knowledge, this is the idea of sort of going to your personal knowledge, your personal gnosis, and connecting with that deep aspect of yourself that has, that divine wisdom and that, ability to know everything, where time doesn't exist, and what happened in the past and the future and all that. So we're connecting to that in order to fire off our magic, whatever magic it may be.
I love it. Now, I used to practice Gnosticism and studied in the past, and one of our practices was astral projection, therefore out-of-body experiences. Does that have anything to do? Is that used in chaos magic, or is it completely irrelevant?
No, you absolutely can. That would be more of an excitatory, because you do have to get yourself into a little bit more of a, I mean, it's a weird one because there is physically it's inhibitory, but mentally it's very excitatory. You need to like really get yourself pushed out there. But yeah, you'll find that there are people that do a lot with that kind of work. Anything that has you kind of separate from the body a bit is kind of popular in the meditative work, just because it's, it is a way to just sort of like put yourself out there and, experience things on a different level, I guess you could say.
Wow, I'm loving chaos magic right now. Okay, let's move on. I kept my final question, and my most intriguing question for the end. What is dark magic? And is there a boundary? Where is the boundary between white and dark magic? Is there a gray area?
There is absolutely a gray area, and I live in the gray area. And I think a lot of practitioners of any kind of witchcraft that have been practicing for a long time find themselves mostly in the gray area, because magic is really hard to make a binary choice between good and bad. Like it just doesn't exist. The world isn't like that. Magic isn't like that. So there are going to be times where something that someone else might say is like dark or black magic, you might be like, no, this is exactly the thing I need right now to achieve something important. And one of those things is protection. A lot of times magic that someone else, or that traditionally is seen as being dark or negative or whatever, is exactly what you need for protection against someone who would do you or a loved one harm. And I feel like when you don't pull out all the stops to protect yourself or those you love, then you're kind of like, what's the point of having your skills if you can't use it for that? And that's another reason why, like for me, like working with chaos magic, feeling completely open to bending my own morals when I need to, which I don't do often, but I have in the past. I have definitely worked very heavy binding magic on people who have been a harmful source of things for me in one way or another. And you know, I think that the idea of, well, you know, anything that's meant to bring good to someone is positive. That's white magic. No, because you know, you don't know unless you specifically asked. You don't know that that person wants the thing that you want for them. So you may be, you know, you may want your you know, your spinster cousin to finally, you know, meet someone and get married. And so now you're like, I'm going to go do a spell for her so she'll meet someone. And then, you know, she meets someone and she's miserable because she's like, I really just wanted to focus on my career. And you're like, but don't you want to get married and have kids? You're 40. No, I don't. I want to focus on my career. Now I got this guy I can't get rid of. Get him out of here. Like, you know, so we, you know, we might come from what we think is a good place, but a lot of times when we do that, we're not really thinking about the other person. We're thinking about ourselves and wanting that person to have the life that we think they should have, because it's the life either we have and we love or we wish we could have. And so we, you know, we want to see it manifest somewhere if we can't make it happen for ourselves. It's the same reason why I have very similar take on healing magic, where I feel, you know, doing healing for somebody without them knowing is really kind of rude. Because you know, illness, injury, all those things are part of the teachers in our life. And just because we might not want to see somebody go through that pain doesn't mean that they shouldn't go through it, and doesn't mean that it's not a positive in the end. And you know, especially like working, like, I don't want my grandmother to die, so I'm going to do a spell to like keep her alive. Meanwhile, your grandmother is in the hospital, like, please just let me go. I can't take this anymore. I'm 100. Let me go. Like, you know, it's not about wanting your grandmother to live a life of whatever. It's you not wanting to face the loss of your grandmother. So that magic, while it may be directed at her, is not about her. It's about you. So my whole thing is, if you're going to work a spell on anyone, look at why. And if it's about you, maybe you need to go do magic on yourself instead and let that other person live their life. And when it comes to things like protection, I say do what you got to do, because to not protect yourself or someone you love and knowing that there's a danger there, I mean, it's like, would you not call the fire department if the house is burning, and would you just stay inside? Like, you know, I mean, that's basic. Like, your life is a burning building. Are you really just going to sit there and let it burn around you because, you know, you don't want to pick up the phone and make a call, you know? So that's just, you know, that's my take on it anyway.
I love your perspective of this in the sense that it's not all black and white. It's not a binary system. There are so many shades of gray in between. And my perspective on, especially on protection, of course, as part of my work, I do a lot of psychic shielding, advanced psychic shielding, removing daggers, cutting cords, and it's such an important aspect of what I teach and my practice. And yet there are in my experience, there are two types of opinions on this topic. One spiritual opinion is that, yes, it's very important to protect yourself and shield and do all the magic work required to ensure you're protected. But on the other end of the scale, there are the people, the spiritual teachers that teach that when you don't believe in protection, when you see oneness and when you're all connected with everybody, then you can't get affected by and negative energy, because your belief is that we're all one and therefore one cannot attack one. Where do you stand on this?
I don't go with that we're all one thing, because that doesn't, to me, that's just not. If we're all one, then I feel that everyone should be having very similar experiences in their life, and everyone, that's just, so to me, that just doesn't even make sense. I get, it's a nice little kumbaya way to approach life, but I think it's also unrealistic. You know, if that were true, then we would have a really big issue with, like, well, then are we all like living in the gutter, or are we all living this like wonderful high life of everything being great? Because there are people on both of those ends of the spectrum and in between. So I feel like, you know, we are all connected, but we're not all one. I believe we're all connected through collective consciousness and all of that, but we're not all energetically one. And I do think that, you know, that's important, an important thing to kind of keep in mind when it comes to doing magic, and understanding that someone else's negative energy, absolutely. Well, I mean, if you've never experienced someone else's negative energy affecting your energy and your mood, then you are a very lucky person, because no, I don't think that anyone who actually deals with other humans in any capacity can say that, you know, they haven't been affected by someone else and what they've brought to the table in some way. So, you know, that's it. I get it. It's a nice, you know, new agey way to say, oh, we're all just, you know, just be good to each other. Yeah, that'd be great if we could all just be good to each other. But clearly ego gets in the way and we can't.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
You know, but yeah, I don't.
It's that
I don't
separation. It's that separation between the ego and realizing that we are human in a human world, and therefore it's a world of polarities, and finding a way to navigate that is essential. Jess.
And if you want to do that, I love the idea of we are all spiritual beings having a human experience, but we still have to have that human experience. You can't, you know, you can be as spiritual as you want, but you still have to be here for now. So.
Jess, thank you so much for joining me today. It was such a pleasure getting to learn about chaos magic. It wasn't as hard as I expected it to be. It's actually so much fun and so interesting. I like the inclusion of philosophy and so many different concepts. It's exciting, actually. So thank you so much for coming on and teaching us all about it. And for everybody watching live, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for catching up the replay or listening the live recording as well on the podcast. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast. It's available on iTunes, on Spotify, on Stitcher, and tune in by searching the Lit Up Lightworker podcast. Be sure to follow Jess here on Instagram, Jess J. Carlson, and me at George Lizos. Jess, where can people find out more about you? Is it Instagram or something else as well?
Instagram's always the best place to find me. I'm also on Twitter with the same username, and of course at my website, jesscarlson.com. You can find my blog and all that fun stuff there.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Jess. Bye-bye, everyone.
Thank you.